So when it comes to basic arithmetic, I am not good. I cannot do even very simple math in my head. You know, you say like 13 plus 7. I don't know. 20, I think. Was that right? I don't know. I'm not confident. So I have no ability to do that. However, when I was going to school, I always tested very well in math comprehension. So I guess that when it comes to, if you give me an order of operations and you explain to me the general principles, I can understand them, but I can't work them out easily in my head. And I always, in the area of mathematics, it's like I need to be very focused. And, you know, there have been a few videos I've had to do in the past where I've had to figure out things mathematically. And when I've had to do that, I've always been sure to double, triple, quadruple check, make sure everything is freaking spotless, okay? Because I know there's a good chance I'm not going to understand it. So when I heard a video called Proving God Exists Using Math, I was like, maybe I should not be the person to take this on. Because even though I feel like I can, with a little mental exertion, grasp some more advanced mathematical concepts, it's really not my forte, and it's not what my mind is naturally good at. I have tremendous respect for mathematicians and for to scientists and other people who endeavor to understand the truth either through solid mathematical means or through empirical means. But ultimately, at the end of the day, while I have profound respect for those things, that's not the area where I flourish. The area where I tend to flourish is the more nebulous realms of rhetoric or artistry or allegory, metaphor, the realms of subjectivity, basically. I consider myself to be, at my core, an artist. Whether I'm good at it or not, who cares? This is not about my level of skill as an artist. This is about the fundamental fact that that is ultimately what my self-image is. And that's why, of course, I'm writing this novel, Sexbot Uprising, that'll hopefully come out pretty soon. I know, said it all before. This is exactly why I'm not good at math, because you just saw it in action. I'm talking about one thing, all of a sudden, weird little tangent about my novel that has nothing to do with anything, and then I'm talking about, oh, I'm an artist and all this crap, and I'm not even talking about the actual subject at hand. This is why I'm no good at math, because it requires focus, and it requires a person who is satisfied with a solution that is certain. There's no guesswork in math. There's no, roughly estimate this. Or if there is, it's under only circumstances where that's the only thing that you could possibly do. Where there's just no way to solve for a particular variable and you have to make assumptions. But for the most part, in mathematics, you want to be dead on. There is a right solution and a wrong solution, and you want to be correct. And so when you make a promise to me like you're going to prove God exists using math, that's what I expect. I expect you to come to me and present an equation and explain that equation and explain to me how that equation proves God. And, you know, wouldn't you know it, that's not what you actually get here. I know you're probably shocked. You probably were expecting, oh, crap, someone proved God at long last. It turns out that's not quite what we're going to get here. So let's take a look. A lot of people have asked me, hey, where do you do your live streams? And the answer to that is that I do live streams called Abandon Hope every Sunday on the Pessimist Productions Patreon. That is linked down below. There is all sorts of other stuff on that Patreon as well. It is about $7 a month, and I think that we offer a pretty generous amount of content in exchange for that membership. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to check out the Patreon link in the description section of this video.
Does God exist? Many atheists think there's no reason to believe in God because we have science to explain everything in the universe. It's true that science is able to explain the natural world, that's what it's for, but by definition science cannot tell us whether there's anything outside or above the natural world, in other words, whether there's anything supernatural. Generally, when people speak of God, they mean a supernatural, all-knowing mind who is everywhere and can do anything.
Well, here we come across our first contentious point, because, this is basically the idea that science cannot know God because God is beyond the realm of the observable. But God is postulated as the creator of the observable. He is postulated as the master of the observable. Numerous times throughout the Bible, God intercedes and changes the nature of reality in order to perform miracles. Depending on your faith, you might believe that God still interacts with this world today. So there should be plenty of opportunities for science to observe things that God has done in the natural world. Second of all, there is no scientific law or anything that makes it so that science cannot possibly know something outside of the natural world. Like, we don't have any means of knowing if there's something outside of the natural world right now, but we don't know that no such means of finding those things exists. We don't know that it's completely beyond our power to do that. And in fact, this is about to be contradicted within this very video.
So what is math, and what does it have to do with God? Math is about numbers, and information about those numbers, and ways numbers connect to each other, but where do we find all—
So you can't say that science has no means of detecting or understanding God because God exists outside of nature, but then say, but we can use math to do it. Because math would have the same limitations science does. It still is something that, as far as we know, exists in this world and this world alone.
All this math. We can't see math, we can't touch math, we can't—
And plus, math being something observable by science, if the answer to the God problem is in mathematics, then science would find it there. In fact, science and math, I don't know if you know this, they're kind of tight.
Taste math. Math is only in the mind. We find it simply by thinking about it and figuring more and more things out. But wait, math also explains things. Math can explain everything from simple counting to the movement of planets. For anything you can think of, there's a bunch of math that explains what's going on, even down to the atomic level. So, if math is only in our minds, but it also explains the natural world, then where does it come from? There's two possibilities, really. One is that math is just something we invented to explain what we observe in the natural world, and that would mean the origin of math is natural. But the other possibility is that math is already there because it controls the universe, and we've discovered it, and if that's true, then the origin of math is supernatural. Here's why the latter option is correct.
Well, you can't say there's two possibilities and then say, but this is the correct one. Well, then the first one was never a possibility and you shouldn't even have mentioned it, right? And by the way, I don't normally do this on this show. Usually I just react to things, but I wanted to make sure. This is one of the rare instances where I've watched something beforehand. And so I decided to look up this idea of like what invented math, or do numbers exist independent of the human perception of them? It's probably not going to surprise you much to learn there's way more than two schools of thought on this. Okay. So I'm going to give you a brief overview. So you have Platonism, which is from Plato, also sometimes called realism. So Platonists argue that numbers and mathematical objects exist independent of the human mind, much like physical objects, which is the view being touted here as the correct view. So the point of view being touted here as the correct worldview is the Platonic view. So anyway, according to this view, mathematical truths are discovered, not invented, and exist in an abstract, non-physical realm. This perspective treats numbers as timeless, unchanging entities. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is nominalism. Nominalists contend that mathematical objects do not exist independent of human thought and language. They view mathematics as a construct of the human mind created to describe and make sense of the world. In this view, numbers and mathematical concepts are not discovered, but are rather inventions or abstractions created by human beings. So the first view is mathematical concepts are actual objects that exist in some sort of non-physical realm. The nominalists are just like, no, we just made all this math shit up. Then there are the intuitionists. Under intuitionism, this perspective, closely associated with mathematician L.E.J. Brewer, holds that mathematics is a creation of the human mind. Mathematical objects exist only insofar as they can be constructed in human thought. Intuitionism challenges the existence of mathematical objects outside of our mental constructs. I'm not sure what the actual difference is between nominalism and intuitionism, but apparently there is one that is just not clear to me here. Formalism. Formalists like David Hilbert view mathematics as a game played with symbols according to certain rules. Numbers and mathematical objects don't have an independent existence but are part of a formal system. This viewpoint sidesteps ontological questions about the existence of numbers and focuses on the rules and practices of mathematics. And then you have the empiricists and the constructivists. And these views, which I, by the way, consider myself to be an empiricist, these views suggest that mathematical knowledge is derived from experience and practical construction. Numbers and mathematical concepts are seen as tools for understanding the physical world, and their validity comes from their utility and effectiveness in explaining observable phenomena. This would be my view of what math is.
Math contains infinite information. There's an infinite number of numbers, each with their own individual properties, and there's an infinite number of numbers in between any two numbers. And we keep discovering things. Pi, which is the number that explains the area of a circle, has an infinite number of digits that we keep discovering by doing calculations. If we were just making this stuff up, we could make pi be whatever we want it to be, but we can't do that because we know that that's not true.
This is absurd. So, once again, like, pi is describing something that actually exists in physical reality. And because of the way that our reality works, you can always get more precise. We have yet to figure things out to the extent where we can 100% quantify every single thing. In fact, I think if we were able to do that, the explanation would become as complex as the thing being explained, and it would totally defeat the purpose of having an explanation in the first place. But like when we come to a concept like infinity, a lot of people think about that wrong. So, like, let's just, like, very quickly do something with infinity here. I have a little notebook here. I could just do this in Photoshop or something, but it's a pretty short demonstration. So let's say we have a point here, and we have a point here, okay? Got that? 2 points, okay? So, let's say we draw a line from this point, and that line continues on to infinity. And we draw a line from this point, and that line continues on to infinity. Well, you have two infinities there, but this infinity is longer than this infinity because it starts a little further back. One infinity can be larger than another infinity. We know that from a very simple demonstration, right? It's also true that, like, in mathematics, there are more possible iterations of a chess match than there are atoms in the universe. Does that mean that math contains, quote unquote, the infinite information of those things? No, it just means that when you look at the rules of chess and how a chessboard is set up and what possible things could happen on it, there are more possibilities there than there are atoms in the universe. So you have a very simple thing, a little simple chess grid, and some different pieces that can move in some different ways. And from that alone, insane amounts of possibilities emerge. Insane amounts, incomprehensible amounts of possibilities exist. So this idea that math contains infinite information, not only does math contain infinite information, but like something as simple as a chessboard contains nearly infinite information. I mean, not nearly infinite. You see what I'm saying, though. It's so mind-bogglingly, astronomically gigantic that it's incomprehensible. Right? I mean, so if a game like chess contains that many possibilities, think about how many possibilities are contained in a more sophisticated game? Like, how many possible ways are there to play Red Dead Redemption 2? The number would be something so mind-bogglingly, insanely huge that it would just defy the comprehension of even like what we posit as God, okay? That's not something contained, okay? That's not something that we actually, like, math doesn't contain those possibilities. There's not like a little box called math and then all those possibilities are shoved inside of it. Math is just describing the nature of reality there, because the nature of reality is that you can have that many different games of chess. You can have that many games of Red Dead Redemption 2. That doesn't mean that math itself is somehow like creating and containing those possibilities. It's just describing our reality. And more than describing our actual reality, it's describing infinite posited realities. Right? And I mean, like, if you subscribe to some form of multiverse theory, you might be of the belief that all of these things are happening somewhere. Anything that could possibly occur is occurring somewhere right now, perhaps infinite times.
We know that all this information is out there somewhere, but it can't be in our physical universe because our universe is finite and math is infinite. That means math contains
there is
every
no
possible
evidence. I mean, I'm not going to say there's no evidence that the universe is finite, but there is no definitive evidence that the universe is finite. There is no way to prove that. We have not seen the edge of the universe. We have not been like, oh, we've mapped it all out. Here are the borders. There is something called the observable universe. In fact, even earlier when I said that there are more games of chess than there are atoms in the universe, I really should have been more precise there. There are more games of chess possible than there are atoms in the observable universe, because there's the observable universe and then there is whatever the fuck lay beyond it, more universe, but universe that we can't see, and we don't know how far that goes. There's conjecture, there's speculation, there's theory, there's hypothesis, there's not fact. We don't know.
Combination of numbers, and if we use numbers as code for letters, then math contains every possible combination of letters as well. That means every book that has...
If there are infinite possibilities, doesn't that make it possible for God to exist? Just saying. Yes, absolutely. But here's the problem. If there are infinite possibilities, then there are infinite gods, and every god exists. So Zeus is real, and God is real. I mean, like, there's no point at that. Like, it breaks down on in a different way at that point, right? Because there's not just one Yahweh. There's infinite Yahweh, and there's infinite Zeus, and there's infinite Odin, and there's infinite every god that human beings have ever conceived of infinitely is iterated throughout infinite universes. If that's true.
Ever been written already exists encoded in math somewhere. In fact, every book that possibly could be written already exists in math. And if we use...
That's a really weird way to think about that. Yeah, I mean, like, this is like the whole, like, you give 10 monkeys a typewriter in infinite time, they're going to eventually recreate the works of Shakespeare or something. Something along those lines. Really, you could say even beyond those books just existing within math, they exist within the alphabet, right? Like 26 letters and a few punctuation marks. Every book that could ever be written exists within those things. Does that mean that you can prove God's real with letters? Maybe you can.
Use numbers as code for particles and their locations, then you could say there's an exact copy of our universe encoded in math. But there's also more stuff in math. So that's why math can't possibly be contained just within...
I mean, this is really weird because you're conflating the description with the described. Just because math can elucidate a possibility, that does not mean that that possibility came from math itself. Math is describing something that could be. That doesn't mean that that thing sprung forth out of math.
There's many pieces of evidence in math to show that math has a designer. Here's an example. One time someone discovered that this simple equation makes a very interesting shape when you graph it in the complex plane, and this is called the Mandelbrot set. But people have analyzed this shape and have found some very scary things about it. What's amazing about the
There's nothing remotely scary about it.
Mandelbrot set is that you can zoom in infinitely and you'll keep finding new things. Over here, you can keep finding more and more copies of the Mandelbrot set no matter how far you zoom in. You could even zoom in really close to something like this, and it takes a while, but look, there's another little baby Mandelbrot set. Alternatively, you could go into this region and find completely different things. On the left side of this thing, you'll find these weird elephant-shaped things that have spirals that go on forever, and you could even zoom into the side of one of the spirals and find new spirals that repeat infinitely and keep generating new infinite patterns like this. Or you could go on the other side of the elephants and find these weird seahorse-shaped things that have different kinds of spirals that are connected to each other, and once again, they keep going on forever. You can zoom in.
So, this is a very clever little bit of sophistry going on here. Because this is being presented as like, oh, this is a whole new argument for God, right? This is a whole other take on the whole God thing. But really, this is a very commonplace argument that atheists have refuted time and time and time again. This is nothing more than the blind watchmaker argument. But instead of pointing to a mountain or a tree or something like that, like the people who make this argument usually do, this guy has pointed to this like beautiful sort of fractal pattern that emerges from a certain equation. And the interesting thing to me is that what do Christians do? Why do Christians say that there must be a God? Because the universe is so complex, it had to emerge from God. But the entire point of the Mandelbrot set, and it's actually pronounced Mandelbrot, by the way, but a lot of people say Mandelbrot, so whatever. The entire point of the Mandelbrot set, or at least one of the things it's commonly used for, is to demonstrate to people how, like, first of all, I mean, obviously it's very aesthetically appealing, but it's also there to demonstrate to people that a complex structure can arise from the application of very simple rules. So you take a very, very simple equation and you graph it out and you end up with something that's insanely intricate, which isn't this the entire point of the evolutionist? Isn't this the entire point of the cosmologist? Extraordinary complexity can arise from very simple things and very simple sets of rules. So really, this Mandelbrot fucking thing is kind of a great refutation of the need for the concept of God. Because here it is, this obviously extraordinarily complex form that emerges from a relatively simple mathematical equation. And the idea that just like the mere existence of a fractal pattern somehow points to God is not only ludicrous, but I think insulting. I think this is actually insulting to the beauty of mathematics. I saw a comment on Quora from a mathematician who, someone on Quora probably who watched this or something similar, says, as an atheist, what is your personal take on the Mandelbrot set? And most people are just saying, like, it has no relation to theism or atheism of any kind. But this guy, Wes Browning, who claims to have studied mathematics at Cornell University, said, as an atheist who happens to be a mathematician, my take on the Mandelbrot set is that it was a brilliant discovery by Benoit Mandelbrot, and it has fuck all to do with either atheism or theism of any kind. Yeah, why would you take something, this very beautiful, very intricate sort of mathematical concept, and then try to incestuously wed it to the morally depraved God of the Bronze Age? Like, has there ever been a more, like, a shittier pairing than those two things? It's like filet mignon with a fucking side of pureed dog shit. Like, why would you try to put some Bronze Age myth motherfucker into a beautiful equation that can be used to educate people and can be used to ignite a passion for mathematics? it just diminishes the entire thing, don't you think?
Infinitely, and you'll keep finding new patterns, but like I said, it's a different type of pattern. Seriously, anytime you explore the Mandelbrot set, you can find brand new things, possibly things that no human has ever seen before, because like I said, there is infinite complexity and infinite information in this one shape.
And that's why I decided to put my small-minded notion of the Christian God in the whole thing and see if I could piggyback that.
That's why this little shape is so scary. We did not invent this because we discovered it by accident, but we did not discover it in our universe. It has infinite complexity, so it can't possibly be in our universe because the universe doesn't have infinites. We discovered it just by calculating.
Like, based on what? You don't know that the universe doesn't have infinites. That has never been conclusively demonstrated.
It. So where the heck did this thing come from? Basic common sense says that someone designed this, but no human designed it. Like we said, math only...
No, it emerged from a fucking simple... Like, the whole point is that it emerged from a simple set of math. It's like a spirograph, right? Anyone have that as a kid? You know, you got the little spiral graph and you draw, you run it around the circle and it creates this crazy little pattern and stuff. It's complexity from simplicity, a complex thing emerging from a simple set of rules. Just like how eventually, given enough time, a single-celled microscopic organism can become a big, fat, bloviating nitwit on YouTube.
Exists in the mind, so its origin must also be a mind. Math contains infinite information, so this mind must be all-knowing. Math controls the universe, so this mind must also be all-powerful. And math is beyond...
controls the universe. Citation motherfucking needed, bro. You have no proof that math controls the universe. You can say that math describes the universe. I mean, I guess you could say that you think math controls the universe, but there's no proof of that. You could say math describes the universe, which I think is far more accurate.
Outside of our natural world, so this mind must be supernatural, and we have just described God.
I mean, even if everything this guy just said, even if all of it added up, even if everything he just told me just now was like, oh yeah, of course there's got to be a God. Even if I bought every step of that argument, every step of the way, at best you arrive at just a deistic God, right? I mean, but you don't even arrive there, to be honest with you. I mean, if this guy thinks that math controls the universe and really thinks that math has the properties that he says it does, then maybe math itself is just God. And I've certainly seen people who believe in that. There was a guy that I refuted a number of years ago. I don't remember what his name was. He had some face paint where he drew a little line through one of his eyes. And he believed that math, like pure mathematics, was ultimately the God of the universe. And said that empiricism was nonsense, but then used empirical arguments to make his case, which is silly.
All these numbers and mathematical facts exist in the infinite mind of God, but it's not just mathematical truth that exists in the mind of God.
I love that this video is called Proving God Exists with Math, and nothing about the proof of God is remotely mathematic, and nothing about, like, there's no equation that he presents here, like, oh, this is the equation that proves God exists or anything. And there's so many just like insanely spurious leaps in logic and things that are just like premises that he doesn't even attempt to sneak through. He just tries to ram them through. Like, obviously, if, you know, there's an infinite math equation, you know, math is infinite, so it must only exist in the mind of God, because that's the only place it could exist if you think about it. Okay, man.
But also moral truth and any kind of truth at all. Goodness, truth, and beauty are just mere opinions of the human mind, unless there is a supreme mind, God, who overrules all human opinions. Because math is beyond time, space, and limits, the existence of math proves the existence of God because math is in the mind of God. As the great scientist Galileo said, math is the language with which God has written the universe.
Okay. Good to know, buddy. I mean, I'll give him this. I've never seen the blind watchmaker argument fancied up so much. Like, he did a real good job in making it seem like that's not what he was doing.